Hello and welcome to the Mild Opinion Podcast, Episode 5. I am Logan.
And I'm Luke.
And today we will be talking about Severance.
All right. Season 2 of Severance just wrapped up last Friday. And for a lot of people, I know a lot of people really liked Season 2. There were a few things where it felt like it was kind of moving slow, but generally it's been pretty well received. And I enjoyed Season 2 a lot. There were some low moments for me, but I felt like the finale made up for it a lot, and I felt like we got a lot of answers which were pretty satisfactory while also leaving a lot of mystery to it.
Yeah, I agree. And in the beginning of Season 2, it was kind of slower, which I think part of that was in comparison to the end of Season 1, because it left in such a big way, like on such a high note. And then you get back into the swing of things with Season 2. And obviously, it can't just be go, go, go the entire time. So I didn't really expect Season 2 to start off with anything super crazy. And I think a lot of people were kind of taken back by that. But I think it was a good choice of starting it off slower. And then as you progress through the season, it gets, you find out some more answers. It gets a little more in depth into what's actually happening and all that stuff, giving us the answers that we were wanting from Season 1. So overall, I think it was pretty good, even in, the slow parts. And overall, I think it was a pretty good season, especially because you could tell that they kind of went in a direction where they were a little bit more creative. Some of the episodes were a little different compared to Season 1, and which is weird to say, as wild of a concept as it was in general and in Season 1. But like they even strayed away from even more, kind of with the weird stuff and the random episodes and stuff like that in Season 2. But I liked it. It was very on brand for the show, like stylistically, the things that they'd done. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I know personally for me, also, before we get too far into anything, we're going to throw a spoiler warning out there because this will be us fully talking about Severance as it is up to date. But for Season 2, for me, I felt like I enjoyed how immediately following the events of Season 1 with all of the innies on the severed floor managing to use the override system to their advantage to try and get out there and basically get word out about the fact that they're being mistreated and that they're onto some weird things going on at Lumen. And then just the way that it ended was so... like, oh my gosh, like, Irving pounding on Bert's door. We don't know how he knows who Bert is, or why he has all this information about people. Dylan holding the gateway open for all of them to still be existing and then getting tackled by Milchek. Mark literally, like, shrieking that his wife is alive, and Helly finding out that she's an Ian, and basically trying to take down the entire company in like 2 minutes with a speech, and then that's just like it. So I really liked how it went from that to in the opening minutes of Season 2 is just like the immediate aftermath of that for the innies, specifically like from Mark's perspective, because Mark's kind of like the main driving force of the innies right now, and like for the most of the show. But I enjoyed that, and then backtracking through that again and then showing it from the perspective of the outies and how much they contrasted. But it also kind of felt right away like you already know something's off, and how weird it felt immediately. Like, here's Miss Huang, this child who we don't know anything about, and then here's this whole new team of employees who we've never seen before. And then when Irving, Dylan, and Helly finally do show back up, they're shown this weird video and all that. And I felt like it kind of was a softball into how weird Season 2 got.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, it's a weird show, but that's kind of like the charm of it. But yeah, I really enjoyed the introduction of that. And then I felt like the points where I was struggling with it the most is after the explosive, like, 4th episode where they are, like, outside, and probably the weirdest we've seen for the show yet. Then I felt like it kind of got to a point where it's like, I'm ready to take some big strides, and that kind of wasn't their intention. They wanted to like take a step back and like give you some context to Lumen, give you some more mystery, and kind of delve deeper into like what's going on with Mark and Gemma.
Mm-hmm. And the episodes following where they go on the retreat or the camp or whatever, it done a very good job of giving you a little bit of backstory, some details that we would not have known otherwise, and stuff like that. But like you said, it was kind of hard to go through that just because it felt like a lot of it was like, yeah, like here's this backstory, like we're learning some things, but it's not captivating enough to like keep me locked in for an entire episode of just like, oh yeah, here's just little things that we're learning. I felt like there wasn't a ton of storyline in those episodes. It was mostly kind of just like feeding us little bits of information, I guess, to like make us wonder, which all in all, the way that the season resolved and everything, it was, it was worth it, and it made it all make sense, at least to a degree. But yeah, some of the lower points of this season, I think the lower points of this were, there were a lot more of them in this season than there were in season 1.
For sure.
But, and also, I mean, not saying that this was a bad season at all, because I really enjoyed it, and I really, especially the way that it wrapped up, was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt like that the direction of this season was a little bit different than how it was in season 1, structurally at least. Because season 1 there was a lot about, being out of the office, then the innies being in the office, and it was kind of like that contrast, but that's how it was structured the entire way through. That kind of started going away in season 2 because of what happened in the finale of season 1.
Mm-hmm.
So the structure was a little bit different, which not necessarily bad, but just a different idea, a different way to go for them. And I think that is going to happen once again, going from what happened in the finale of season 2 into season 3, because of all the events that had taken place with Mark staying and Gemma getting out, and part of the Cold Harbor plans being foiled. So I don't know. I think the structure,
and finally getting some context on Cold Harbor, even though we still, like we said, we don't know the why of anything, but we see what's behind the door, and the whole time it's like, where is this all leading? And I guess like I kind of liked that we didn't get the full answer of Cold Harbor, but we see like what's going on with Gemma, and then the inevitable, like the whole time it seems like it's leading to one of the innies, if not all of them, but it just ended up being Mark getting down to that floor and seeing what's down there.
Yeah, and as season 2 progressed, I was kind of worried about that, because at the end of it, we knew that we were getting to a point where like they were going to try and rescue Gemma, and we were going to learn about Cold Harbor and all that. And I'm glad that it ended the way that it did without spoiling everything that's going on, like all of Lumen's plans, because I thought at first that it was either going to be one of those things where they try to get her out, they don't succeed, and then Lumen keeps going with their whatever bad plan is, or conversely, they do get Gemma out, and Mark and Gemma escape, and they try to help, the other innies or whatever. And then season 3 would be a kind of like, all right, we know what they're doing. This is why. Now we got to try and fight Lumen, which that's not really the direction that I wanted to go. I wanted the mystery and the innies and outies. Like the way that it's kind of structured now, I'm fine with. I didn't want it to be like, here's all the information. Now it's just going to be them fighting back against Lumen. That was the direction that I did not want.
Well, I think which will kind of feed into that, is like at the end of season 2, we do get more context, and it does like come to a head of like where all this is leading, but it sets up a lot of next steps for a lot of conflicts, and some of them are new. So like going character by character here, we have like Mark now internally at war with himself, basically, but any Mark now for the first time kind of has the upper hand of like he took charge when he knew what was at stake, and he decided to take the life that he wants instead of what his Audi wants, even not knowing what that means by turning back and going with Helly. Helly now has been at war with herself the whole show because she's literally the enemy, but also kind of the most rebellious of them as her innie. Has now been told by her father that he favors her innie over his daughter that is trying to impress him, and that he sees more of Kier in her. Dylan's kind of back to, like, full, like, in on it because he kind of had a, like, aha moment with his Audi, even after it seemed like that was going to be a little more, like, conflictive. I don't expect that to be the end, but it seems like it's at a more stable place now. Irving's just in the wind. I hope we see Irving back because he's one of the characters I think is one of the most interesting out of them. And then Cobell, Devin, Rickon, no idea what's next for them. And then Milchek, who has been a big standout character this season, has had so much, like, internal conflict, and it seems like he might be at a point where he's either going to turn his back on Lumen or that's the logical next thing that happens for him. But I think just when you're talking about structure of this season, it's felt just a lot more like it's felt a lot less linear than like season 1 in terms of, like, it shows you something, then it backtracks and gives you context, and then it jumps over here to another character and they're the focus for a while. And then you come back to a question from a few episodes ago, and they're like, well, we're going to tell you a little bit more about that now.
And I think with the... how, like you said, it's not as linear in Season 2 as it was in Season 1. It kind of works for what they're trying to do, because at this point in the show, when they're trying to figure it out, they're busting Gemma out, people are dying, like... There's a lot going on, and I think if it was as linear as Season 1 was, it wouldn't have worked as well, just because, like, this season, with everything that's going on, is a lot more chaotic than Season 1 was. Like, don't get me wrong, Season 1 was chaotic, but Season 2, there's a lot more going on. More people are getting involved. They're realizing the severity of what's happening. So, I mean, I think with that being more chaotic and all that, it really helps get down to, all of the things that are happening at once. That's all part of this, trying to take down Lumen and save Gemma and figuring it all out, the innies and stuff. And I think with the Irving stuff, he'll obviously be back. There's no way that he's just gone. But I really hope that it's one of those things that he comes back soon, like, hopefully, maybe midway through Season 3, and it's not like he's gone for a long, extended period of time. Because, he is one of the most interesting characters, in my opinion. But
and there's so many loose ends about him, and he seems like if anybody is going to be able to put, like, a real chokehold on Lumen now, I'd say there's a few of them. There's, like, Milchek, because he has direct access to the innies. And he seems to be kind of turning their way. Gemma is now on the outside, but that means Lumen knows she's gone, so she's now a big target for them, because it's like, oh, she can't be telling everybody about this. And then Cobell and Devin. Cobell seems to be full now, like, hatred of Lumen, but I still believe that she has nobody's best intentions in her mind. But I do think Irving... It's not as simple as Bert just being like, our innies got to love each other, so, like, you should take that and leave. Like, especially where the last time we saw Irving, his innie seemed fairly confident that was not his end. Like, he wasn't panicking or freaking out or anything. Like, he knew at least enough to have faith that his Audi was up to something, because he had this whole plan to find the exports hallway. He had that weird dream vision sequence where... This goes into another thing, like another theory. I think Irving has been reintegrated to some extent, because it looked like he was working in a department side by side with Bert. And it seemed like a different thing than like him working in optics and design and Irving working in macro data, but there is so much left to Irving, and I think he's going to be very important in being part of this outside movement against Lumen moving forward.
Yeah, and that is one thing that I really like about Irving is that when we first met all of the characters in season 1, he was such, like, out of all of them, he was like the least standouty. Like, he was very unassuming, you know, he was kind of like by the book, you know, rule follower, kind of just grumpy. And then you learn more about him and you're like, all right, well, his Audi is obviously into some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And then, you know, his innie becomes kind of more confident as a character with, like, the stuff that they're doing that they know is, like, against Lumen policy or whatever. So I think, like, his character development has been really awesome. And also just how interesting his Audi is compared to his innie was a really cool choice for his plot development and character design. Sure. I think going back to the Milchick and Cobell thing, how you said like Cobell doesn't really have anyone's best interest in mind, and then like Milchick maybe turning against Lumen because he can very obviously, you know, doesn't like the things that they're doing completely. I could see them as not necessarily being like strictly good or bad, but being like neutral, kind of helping out the innies here and there, but also not being with the innies completely. Which I think I would like that for both of those characters actually, just because like to have them completely flip on Lumen, I don't know if that would really fit how they are as characters. But to be in like a sort of neutral ground, like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna do what's best for me, but also I feel bad for what's going on. Like that that's a I don't know. I think that would fit both of them in terms of character development really well.
I think Milchick especially, like, he doesn't seem like he hates the ideals of Lumen or anything, but he hates his superiors and how they talk to him, and like it seems to be kind of that thing where like they're not always down there with him, and like they're not the ones dealing with it, so they're the ones like commenting on him and telling him he's doing it wrong. And he's down here trying to... It's kind of like this season has given you kind of some perspective on what he thinks about being down there, which is like they tell him to tighten the leash and stuff, but he's also the guy who is organizing these retreats and stuff, and like still for some weird purposes a lot of weird things happen on the retreat, but he takes the time to like organize little parties for them and stuff, and he listens to them to an extent. And then I think that really came to a point where in the second to last episode of this season, he kind of has like a internal thing you can watch going on where when Mark S. doesn't show up on the day that he's supposed to complete Cold Harbor, and he finally calls Milchick. Milchick is kind of questioning him for a second, like, are you okay? Are you sure you can't come in? Like, tell me what's going on. And then Mark goes like, honestly, the truth is I just need a mental health day or whatever. And then Milchick kind of sits there for a second. He's just like, okay, just take care of yourself. I was like, see, he does. There is part of him that's not just like Drummond over here and like Jamie Egan and Helena and all them. There's a part of him that's more human towards the innies. Yeah. So I don't think it's that he's against Lumen. I think it's that he doesn't believe what the rest of them believe, that the innies are not people.
Yeah, and I can see that. And honestly, if they explored that a little bit more, I think that'd be really cool, because obviously they're not done with Milchick, and he'll continue to probably grow as a character, and hopefully we learn a little bit more about him and why he is the way that he is. But and like how you said, like he doesn't necessarily like hate Lumen or their ideals. I do definitely agree with that, just because if he did, he wouldn't be there anymore. I mean, he wouldn't put up with that. No, he does what they tell him, even though he doesn't like it. And he doesn't seem like, I don't know, I guess kind of like weirded out by all the random things that like Lumen does. It's mostly just like his superiors, like you said, and the people above him, which is understandable because they treat him terribly. Yeah. But also with the Lumen stuff, what do you think is happening? Not with like, you know, how they were doing the stuff with Cold Harbor and whatever. Just in general, like, what do you think Lumen is, like, trying to do? Because they're all culty and weird, and they preach the ideals and stuff. Like, what's going on there?
I see. I think I know, and then there's like something off to the side which makes me be like, I'm lost on what they're doing. So
Yeah.
it seems to me like the whole point of Cold Harbor, especially in the scene with Drummond, where he's like about to sacrifice the goat or whatever, he says that the sacrifice of that particular goat in Gemma's name is a major step towards Kyr's war on all suffering. So I think, but I don't think this is their only goal. The whole point of Cold Harbor to me seems to be to eradicate any sense of unease, pain, fear, dread, stress in your life, so that there's another version of you who has to experience that. And then the kind of just like examples we've seen, like that senator's wife who didn't remember giving birth or whatever, it seems like the elite versions of people are the ones that don't have to find out about that. And every other version, because they said Cold Harbor was Gemma's 25th personality. There's 25 different versions of Gemma, all who seemingly go through horrible, or not even like terrible things, but who go through all these things without knowledge of what any of the rest of them are doing or how many of the rest of them exist in their own head. So I think it's really just the ultimate goal of Cold Harbor is to eradicate all sense of suffering in the sort of mindset that you just don't remember it, so it didn't happen to you. It happened to your Annie, who is not you. But I don't think that's the only thing Lumen is doing, because when you look back at all these weird clues and stuff going on, I don't believe the goats are just as simple as a sacrifice. If they need that many people looking over that many goats at a time, and there's a whole department for it, I think, and there's that guy dressed up as a goat, which is like, I wish they came back to more of the goat people. But I liked seeing, I don't remember what her character's name is, but Gwendolyn Christie actually like kind of give some context to that, and then whoop Drummond's butt a little bit, because I don't know about you, I hated Drummond.
Yeah, I did not like Drummond at all.
I hated him. I think back to season 1, they go to, I forget what they call it, the place with all the statues of the former CEOs of Lumen.
Oh, yeah.
There's a big wall with a bunch of smiles on it, which is like, don't know what that is. It's something I haven't seen as many people talk about, but I'm still like puzzled by it. That Lumen has existed for a very long time, and only in Cobell's lifetime have they introduced Severance as a procedure. So they've been doing things beyond that. So I just don't see severing personalities being their only goal. And also, you saw the paper of how many directions they had to take to get to that. The exports hall. There's got to be, it seems like miles long down there. There's got to be tons of stuff that we don't know yet. And going all the way back to Petey, he had that drawing of a bunch of weird things. And if you've ever looked at like a still image of it or whatever, there's some like bizarre things that you can see on there. Yeah.
And also another thing that I feel like will be explored later, or hopefully, is when they go through like the overtime protocol and stuff like that. You can see like in like the manuals and stuff that they're looking through, there's like a bunch of other protocols and stuff. And I'm hoping that we learn like what those are and why. Because from what it seems like, if you're severed, Lumen could pretty much just take over.
Yeah.
Like they can just take control of you whenever, which is kind of scary, especially because part of their underlying goal, which I feel like they've talked about it a little bit, especially when it comes to like the conflict of the people who don't like severing, and then people who like are severed or like Lumen. They talk about it a little bit, but it's not really addressed that much just because of all the other things going on that are more important currently. But I mean, I think they're trying to push like everyone to get severed, like make it like normal. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if they have that kind of power over anybody who's severed, if they normalize it more, then that could be really scary.
Yeah. Well, going all the way back to season 1, that finale of season 1, when we first meet Jaime Egan, like in person, he says something to who he thinks is Helena, but it's Helly at the time. He says to her that someday when everybody is like severed or something, like that one day the idea is for everybody to have this chip. Yeah. So, and I think that's part of that digs more into the cult stuff, is like, mm-hmm. This is all some sort of belief system that they're trying to instill in innies so that at some point all innies follow these rules.
Mm-hmm. And that's just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said about like how Jaime Egan was talking to what he thought was Helena, but it was actually Helly. Do you think that at the end of season 2, like the very last scene, when Mark does not leave with Gemma, do you think that was actually Helly, or do you think that was Helena? Because that look, the way that she handled that, the look that she gave Gemma as they walked away and stuff, and then also, like, I feel like Helly would have, maybe talked to Mark a little bit, or, like, tried to influence his decision maybe one way or the other. But I don't know, just the way that that was handled did not seem like it was Helly. That seemed much more in line for Helena,
mm-hmm.
which I think kind of tracks, just because she's been kind of weird with Mark anyway.
Yeah, I think from the moment she ran onto screen when he was stopped at the door, I felt like something was kind of off. The looks that she gave Gemma was weird, and then if you just think about Helly, in the timeline of the show, this is maybe like 2 weeks after the initial freak out where they got the overtime contingency stuff to go down. This is a person who has been at Lumen for maybe a few weeks at this point, and she literally, in an attempt to get back at her innie, tried to kill herself. I don't believe that she would just hand over an opportunity to her innie to continue to do whatever she wants to her friends, especially since when they're running back, Helly would not know what is going to happen. I feel like she'd take the risk and be like, no, get out of here.
Yeah.
The only thing in my mind that's making me be like, maybe that actually was Helly. Well, okay, there's 2 things, which is maybe she loves Mark back like that much that she doesn't want to lose him that bad. But there's the conversation that she has with Jaime Egan where he says to her that he sees more of Kier in her than he ever saw in Helena. So if this was Helly, she could either be thinking like she can leverage that some way, because that gives her kind of the first real advantage other than being in control of her own body at some times, over her other self that she's had. But that's also dangerous territory, because it's also, that seems to be what Jaime wants from her, is to lash out like that.
Yeah. I think the only other thing about it that was weird, other than, the stuff that we mentioned earlier, like the look that she gave and all that, and not convincing Mark to try and leave, is that before he completed Cold Harbor, when they were in there talking stuff, I know it kind of got to a weird space where, like, because at first she was, full on, like, oh, like, you gotta save her, like, you have to do it, like, we'll figure it out, you know what I mean, like, this is no life for us anyway, like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And then she was like, yeah, like, I wish we had more time together and stuff, which the little bit of doubt maybe convinced her to, be weird at the end if it is Helly, but I don't know. Just the way that she was so sure and, like, telling Mark, like, oh, yeah, like, you gotta go, like, you gotta save her, you gotta do it, you know what I mean, like, there's no life for us here, and all that. I'm like, I just feel like she wouldn't have just let him come back.
Yeah. And also, I feel like the Ennies can't be idiots about this. They have to know that Lumen as soon as they get the chance, is not letting Mark out of that building anymore, because now his Annie has technically, like, they could blame his Annie or Audi for it, but his Annie was involved in it, literally killed a Lumen employee and put this whole plan in motion to get down to the exports hall, knows that Gemma was down there, and he's not going to be of any use to them anymore, because the moment Drummond saw him after the Cold Harbor thing was complete, he tried to basically kill him.
Yeah.
Like, he was ready to strangle Mark. So they have to know that Lumen... I just don't see Lumen in any capacity letting Mark out of there again, unless they, for some reason, come up with another severed version of him.
Yeah, and the only other thing that was kind of confusing, not really confusing, but just like, why did they do that, is that obviously they see themselves, the Annies see themselves as like, all right, well, we're also like our own people. Like, we don't have the memories and knowledge, like, even though they share the same body, like, they see themselves as their own people, which is, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And like, they're worried that, if they're not in a place where they're like severed and all that, they'll just be gone forever, like, kind of like they died, which also makes sense. Like, nobody wants to die necessarily, you know what I mean? So it all makes sense on that idea, but like with like running back in, like wanting to stay and stuff, and like any Mark not trusting Audi Mark to like reintegrate and all that stuff, and being like kind of weary of it, like, yeah, that also makes sense. But then it's like, well, do you really trust staying and with the people who kept your Audi's wife prisoner?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like the people who tried to murder you, who are like in control of you. Like, why do you trust that more than you trust your Audi self? Like, that doesn't really make sense. I was like, why?
These are also the people who you saw. Irving, who, when he tried to take out Helly, Milchek basically was like, okay, that's it, you're gone, like, you're banished from existence, or whatever he said. Like, Dylan now... the only, like, thing that gives any hope for, like, them running back, I feel like, is Helly's an Egan that James likes more than his daughter, and the last we see of Dylan, he has an army of Lumen's marching band turned against Mr. Milchek.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, like, which, I mean, I guess, in a sense, they weren't really using that much logic by running back into enemy territory, but I don't get it. I don't understand where the thought process was, because there's all these bad things that can happen to you that I feel like would be much worse than just, leaving and then maybe coming back.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was something that I was just like, why? Why are you doing that?
This does lead, though, like, I just wonder, I really have no idea how Season 3 will pick up from this. I don't think, I honestly feel like it's going to be, I feel like it makes the most sense to me to starting from Gemma's perspective, and then not showing you immediately what happens after that. Because they're now in kind of switched positions where, like, Mark is now any Mark, although he took what frees him, like, he made the choice to live his own life there, because he kind of even told his Audi he doesn't hate his life there, he just doesn't agree with a lot of the stuff, and it's all he's ever known. They're kind of in the reverse positions now, because he's staying at Lumen to the best of his ability, no matter what, just to be with Helly, and Gemma's the one on the outside. The difference is, though, is Mark kind of wants to be in there, and Gemma has potentially Lumen hunting her down. So I'm like, the next logical steps for me of where this could go is start with Gemma, show us what happens immediately after that, or jump to, like, Irving or Cobell and Devin and see what's going on there.
Yeah.
Or I could also be seeing it being something where Season 3 starts off completely on something else that we've never seen before. But right now I feel like there's not necessarily a clear idea of what happens next, which I guess, at the end of Season 1 you don't really have an idea of what's going to happen after you're left on the biggest cliffhanger. I'm trying to be so sympathetic. I'm so grateful that I watched this show, season 1, just like a month before season 2 came out.
Yeah.
Because I would have been driven nuts if I had to wait for 3 years to find out what happens after that.
Yeah, that's crazy. I am glad that they have came out and said, like, oh yeah, it's not going to be nearly as long for season 3. Like, we know that you guys want it. You know, we're working on it. Like, that's very nice. I'm very happy for that.
Yeah. And a lot went into that, too. Like, there was the writer's strike, and I know they had, like, some sort of production difficulties. But they've already been in the writer's room, I feel like, since season 2 started airing. And so that probably means in the next 6 months or so they'll start shooting. So I'd probably say about a year and a half is probably when the next stuff will start.
I hope
showing
so.
Up.
I need some more content. I
Me too.
need more storyline.
Yeah, I hope to. I don't want season 3 to be the end of this show because it's so like niche and like creative and like out of the box a lot of the times. But I don't want this to be a show that is dragged on because of its own success.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want them to have the ending in mind and be like, okay. Like, I honestly want season 4 or 5 to be like, wrap it up.
That's how I feel about it. Like, I think, especially with this show, there's so much that they could cover because there's so much that we don't know. But I don't want it to, like, keep dragging on and then just kind of milking it just because it's successful, like you said. But also, you know, I don't want it to be one of those things where I feel like they get through just the, you know, Mark storyline, Mark and Gemma, and then they're like, yeah, that's it. And then there's all these random other questions about Lumen and the other characters and what happens. So I feel like it's a very, especially like this show in particular, it's a very fine line just because it's in the weird place of, you know, you don't know anything, but also you don't want to get overwhelmed with these things that you don't, you know, like they just, the world building and what's going on needs to be right there in the sweet spot because they could go a lot of ways. Like this could, you know, if they really wanted to keep it going, which I'm not saying they're going to. This is not like a theory or anything, but like they could do the whole making Severance normal and doing the take over the world thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, not saying that's a theory or that's what's going to happen, but like they could go that big with it, or they could just keep it as small as it is now.
Sure.
So I think, like, you know, it's just a fine line with what they could do and what they will do.
Yeah. Well, this brings me to something I was going to ask you. Just with what they've done so far, what are, like, some of the moments in Season 2 that you felt like you enjoyed or, like, stood out to you the most?
It's a good question. Well, I liked finding out about Cold Harbor because that was something that, like, as soon as they started bringing it up in Season 1, I was like, I have to know what that is. Like, I need to know right now what that is. And then just going into more about the different departments and stuff because, you know, it progressed from in Season 1 where they thought it was just MDR, and then they find optics and design, and then they find the goats and all that. And, like, it just feels like they're slowly adding more pieces to this puzzle, more departments of severed people and stuff, which is really cool. So I did enjoy that. And then also, I think just the idea that the people on the outside, like, you know, Devin and, like, well, obviously Cobell, but, you know, just other people outside of Lumen and, like, the severed people are starting to be like, oh, wow, like, this is, like, really bad. Like, not just because of, like, how, like, it's, like, controversial to be severed, but, like, it's, like, actually bad. Like they're doing bad things. Yeah.
Yeah. I think some of the things that I think were, like, the most important about Season 2, I feel like the Dieter Egan story in the Ortbo episode is gonna be like really important. And I told you this, it's because Milchek made a line of saying, like, that this knowledge is, like, forbidden on the severed floor. So I feel like that's something where they're gonna come back to that. But also Irving kind of that's the last time we saw his innie. But as we said, like, he didn't seem all too fearful about that being his last time, because he kind of knew something about his Audi. Well, I feel like he just had the instinct that his Audi's up to something too, but he had also laid the groundwork for the others to, like, take the next steps against Lumen.
Yeah.
And then, beyond that, getting some context of what happened to Gemma and finally seeing Cold Harbor was great. And then, I think in the finale episode, I really did not like Drummond as a character. Like, nothing against the actor, because he did a great job, and he was, like, the perfect scumbag Lumen goon, but I liked him throwing down with Mark and Gwendolyn Christie, and then seeing Milchek have, like, his argument with the animatronic Kier Egan, and then him doing the dance moves, like, to top the music dance experience from season 1, and then just the way it ends too was awesome.
Yeah.
Even though it's, like, so much, like, I felt like I was on Audi Mark's side, where I was just like, just get out of there.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I was like, dude, you got your girl back, just go, and then figure everything else out, like, afterwards.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I felt that way too.
I felt like too, like, it did give more depth to kind of the ownership that his innie feels for his half of the mind that they both share. So another thing I was just going to ask you was, what are, like, some of the big lingering questions or thoughts you have about things you want them to dive deeper on, or characters you want to explore more?
Well, obviously we've talked about him quite a bit already, but I really want them to explore Irving more for the reasons that we talked about earlier. Same with Milchik. I think just because they're super interesting. I wouldn't mind knowing a little bit more about Cobell, just because, like, finding out that, like, she was the inventor of, like, Severance and everything, and, like, all these protocols, like, she's, like, a genius. And somehow she's not, why is she not higher up? You know what I mean? Like, why was she only just the severed floor manager?
Yeah, and they kind of disrespect her, too.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious about that, like, why? And also, like, how did she get to the point to where she was, like, doing stuff like that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Curious about that. This is, like, more theoretical, just random out there stuff. But I kind of have this random feeling, especially with the way that they talk about him and all the different crazy technology and stuff that they have and all the things they can do. I have this weird feeling that Kier is somewhere, not saying he's still alive, running around somewhere, but, I don't know, kind of like the old, like, Walt Disney theory, like he froze himself for the future or something like that. Like, I feel like, I don't know, he's such, like, a god to all these people. Like, I feel like there's something more with him. Like, he's not just gone and, like, dead.
Yeah, and Lumen is, like, not saying, like, Disney is, but, like, Lumen is, like, a very powerful corporation, and, like, Disney is also a very powerful corporation. So who knows?
Yeah, like, I don't know. I have this weird suspicion that there's something more with Kier. He's not just this founder that became this godlike person to these people.
There's all those theories, too, where they were saying, or there was a lot of theories around that the Cold Harbor, or, like, the whole purpose of Severance and all, like, the end goal of that is to resurrect Kier Egan. And this actually goes into one of my kind of questions / theories, is they kind of only address this earlier in the season. I still have a big question mark about the board. I don't think the board is a person that exists, like, physically. My theory on it, and I've seen other people with this theory, is that the board is the collective consciousness of every other CEO. But the problem with that is that Cobell supposedly invented the severance procedure.
Yeah.
So it raises a lot of questions there's still just like what's going on with the board, and why does Natalie seem unable to say anything outside of what they would approve of?
Yeah. Another thing that I was kind of thinking about, and this is, just more of the theoretical random stuff, is that they always talk about Keir. There's like the Keir folklore and all the stuff that he done and his ideals and what he wanted and all that. But they're so like culty. And I'm like, part of me wonders like, did he even like have a part of this? Like, is this like what he would have wanted or like what he actually was? Or like, was he just the founder of this company and then they like used him as propaganda and kind of just like ran with it?
Yeah. Well, and you learn all these weird stories about him too. Like, well, first of all, there's the paintings of him, which make him look very like colonial.
Mm-hmm.
But then they tell stories about him like he was biblical. Like,
yeah.
The whole Dieter Egan story, also another big question mark. I feel like they'll come back to that. It's very like metaphorical and like symbolic in telling you that he strangled his brother. And then also just like anytime somebody's talking about him, they talk about him like he's still a presence.
Mm-hmm.
So like when they're going to execute the goat in honor of Gemma, Drummond says something like, "May this goat guide you to Keir,"
Yeah.
or something like that. And it's like, why do we think this ordinary human being is on some ascended plane of reality?
Yeah.
It's just bizarre.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting too, and like just the way that they talk about him and like depict him to be like, I don't know, maybe he was some kind of great being, in a higher plane or something. I don't know, but as far as we know, from what we can tell, he was a regular guy who started this company, and then they kind of just went with it, just like how like when Milchick was talking to the like wax figure, whatever, like animatronic. And then he tells him that
he's it off.
Yeah, he tells him he's like 6 inches taller than he really was and stuff. Like, I mean, they do stuff like, why are they picturing him like he's some great guy if he was just some, just a normal, a regular guy?
Well, yeah, and they tell you a story about how he murdered somebody, so it's like, there's a lot to unpack about Keir.
Yeah,
I feel like he's not what they're claiming he was. I think it's gonna be. I think, to some extent, they're trying to make it seem like he was a great hero, but I do think it's going to be something bad, like he was some very evil tyrant or something like that. Just because they depict him very opposite that, but then they do leave little seedlings of doubt about who he was and what he did.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's kind of... It probably is something like that. Just like all throughout history, there's all these like tyrants and dictators from old times, stuff like that, and the people who he was above, they were like, oh yeah, he's the best, they're great, whatever. And then to everyone else, they're like, ew, you know what I mean? Like, what is that?
And to just obviously, like, we see Helly is the next generation of the Egans, but James Egan seems so like odd.
Mm-hmm.
But also, and I think this will be important later on, he mentions how he sired others in the shadows, and then when they go to the birthing cabins, Cobell says that Devon was one of Keir's, like, kind of like side pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of raises the question of, like, have we seen somebody who is a descendant of James that we have not seen yet?
Yeah.
Or that we don't know that about yet. And that kind of makes me be like, it'd kind of be a little messy, but is Mark somehow an Egan? Because Cobell, from the start, took a strange interest in Mark. And she knows more stuff about everything than she lets on. Like, even as she's come clean about stuff, there's more to her.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think it's weird the way that like they treat Keir like, a godlike figure. And then his direct lineage, the Egans, James Egan, like they're like, yeah, like he's the boss, but like it seems like no one really cares about what he's doing. Like no one's like, you have a direct descendant of what you people act like it's like you're God, and then you just
He
like...
also doesn't seem like he really does anything.
Yeah,
like he gets mad. He shows up, gets mad, sits in front of, and like in the finale, he just like, it says he's taking a test, but then he's just watching Gemma, and then he screams at his computer.
Yeah.
And then he tells Helly that he likes her, but it's like, where is he all the time, and what is he doing? Also, just in general, the higher ups at Lumen seem very like sparsed out. Like it's like Milchek is the direct link between the higher ups and the innies, and then there's like Helena and Drummond and like that category, and then there's James, but there's also the board, and I'm not sure exactly how those power structures level one another out.
Yeah. Oh, there's one more thing that I feel like a lot of people have kind of just glazed over just because of all this stuff that happened that was like important. But like, what is it about like Gemma and Mark, which I know you just talked about like Mark and like why he was so special, or like, you know, but like, why did they need Gemma, and like why did they need Mark? Like, what is it about like them two specifically? Like, and like, how did they decide upon making Gemma the one that they were going to take to do this?
Personally, I think it has something to do with maybe not their lineage, but their like DNA. Because in the episode where we get the, also like it was a very like artsy episode, but the episode that's all about Gemma, we see her and Mark at a blood drive with the Lumen logo. Like the people who are doing it are somehow linked to Lumen. Then later when they go to the fertility clinic, that same logo is there. And I've seen people point this out. I'm not sure if this was like just a guy who looked like him, but you know the like creepy dentist guy?
Yeah, the doctor.
He like supposedly walks by.
See, well, when I first watched it, I was like, wait, is that him? Like, I noticed that, like, as I was watching it, and I was like, I can't really tell, but I'm like, I think that is him.
Yeah, so...
I mean, maybe they had their radar on those two from the start. Maybe, like...
But also just that they are into DNA stuff and fertility stuff also is like, they've got their hands in a lot more pots than just...
Yeah.
Eliminating your memories of bad things.
Yeah.
Because also... just Gemma, like they faked her death for this. Like they didn't go get a volunteer because there's people who are severed. They could have just gotten a severed employee, made another severed thing for them, and then they don't remember that happens to them outside of work anyway. Yeah. Instead, they faked somebody's death to get this accomplished, which is like, why?
Yeah. Well, and like I don't. That's why I'm like, why did they pick them? Why? And when you bring up, now that I'm like sitting here thinking about it, the fertility place being like Lumen, and the possibility of the doctor being there, and the blood drive and all that, where they meet and stuff like that being Lumen. Like, now I'm thinking about it more. I'm starting to think, like, was this like planned? Like, were they planned to meet and all this? Like, was Lumen like that far ahead? Like, were they like, this is gonna happen? Like, because if so, that's, I mean, it could be. That's kind of wild.
It's, who knows? They seem smart, even though they keep having like catastrophic things happen. But they definitely are just, they're up to so much more than we've seen. Yeah. And although we got the big answer to the big question of this season, there's a lot of different ways they can go with it. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think that about does it for today. Well, this has been The Mild Opinion, episode 5. Thank you for listening. And if you haven't watched Severance and are still with us this late in the game after we've spoiled the entire show, go watch it. It's a great show. Thank you for listening.